Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the February 8th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to have a moment of silence for John J. Ahern. Dr. Ahern passed away on January 24th, 2021. He was a lifelong educator, beginning his career teaching history at South Junior High School in Weymouth. He moved to Silver Lake for 15 years as an assistant principal and assistant superintendent. In 1992, he became superintendent of Abington Public Schools and remained there until his retirement in 2007. Jack will be remembered as a true leader. Jack loved the outdoors and sports. He enjoyed spending time with his family, watching his grandchildren play sports, and vacationing with his family in Vermont, Ireland, and Disney World. He will be deeply missed by his family and friends. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Public announcements, anything, Mike,
Nope, nothing tonight.
Kevin,
I have nothing.
Alex,
No.
and Jim?
I'm all set, thank you.
Not much going on, I guess. Okay, public comments. Does anybody have any public comments they want to make about anything on our agenda? We do have one item on the agenda is the discuss moving police dispatch to Holbrook. We're going to have some people speak on that, and I'll allow the public to ask some questions through me at that time. But does anybody have any comments on anything else in the agenda? Kind of give me a wave, a thumbs up, speak, if you can unmute yourself. Okay, seeing nothing, the first action discussion item is the vote to approve the minutes of January 11th, 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 11, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes from January 11th? All those in favor of approving?
Aye.
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 That's unanimous. Next up is discuss moving police dispatch to Holbrook. That's a regional dispatch. Did you want to talk on that first, Scott, or?
Yeah, I guess to introduce the subject, it's something that, it came up in some discussions that Deputy Chief Cutter and Chief Nuttall and I were having on looking at the current protocol and procedure for what happens when someone picks up 911 or picks up a phone, whether it be a cell phone or a landline, and the different responses or where those calls go to. There seems to be a difference. So we wanted to address that and looking at the big picture of the whole thing. Regionalizing is something that the state is really promoting. So we wanted to take a good look at this and whether it was a good fit. The fire department, as you'll hear from Chief Nuttall, has been using this regional dispatch center for quite some time now. And we'll hear about the results that they've had. So the consideration was what to do with the police dispatch center. Right currently now it's in the police department and it's being served by civilians mostly. But we wanted to get into this discussion and then get a sense of from the selectmen on if you wanted us to pursue this further. So I think Chief Nuttall, if you'd like to start off, we'd like to hear maybe from your experience.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. And members of the board, thank you. I'm glad you brought this up. I did see your meeting last time when this was briefly discussed, and I know that there were some current concerns, and I'm glad that those concerns were brought up because we get a chance to kind of address them again. We've done this in the past, and anytime I get a chance to kind of remind people just of the benefits that we've had and the financial, the cost efficiencies of going through Holbrook in a regional dispatch center, I love to do that. So quickly, I'd like to just remind everybody that this is not the first time we've done a regional agreement or contracting services out. We've done this many, many times very successfully in this town. South Shore Vocational High School, the regional high school, that's one of the best regional, I think, agreements that we're in. I know I have two kids that went and currently going there, and they love that immensely for the benefits that we're not really able to afford what they have for capabilities there. School busing, trash, we contract that service out. Town council, we contract that service out. Can you imagine if we had to hire a whole network of attorneys if they were on the town payroll? That's why we contract them out, because it's much more cost effective, and they're much more skilled because they're getting this from all these other areas as well, not just Abington. So we get very highly trained and experienced personnel doing that. And again, the Abington Fire and EMS and EMD, which I'll explain, which we've been doing with Holbrook Regional Dispatch since 2012. And quickly, I'll talk on that, just some of the benefits we've had, because we've had a history with them since pretty much October of 2012. And I still remember the night that we went live with Holbrook. It was one of the best nights I've ever had, because for the first time ever since I've been in this job over 30-something years in Abington, we had somebody that was constantly listening, constantly monitoring. They had our backs. We were not dumping out the fire station anymore. We had somebody constantly monitoring the fire alarm system, because that was routinely, we'd be abandoning dispatch to go out and to try to get our person out on calls. That was the best night, and it's continued from that time, tested time and again with very serious calls, very traumatic calls, multiple calls, whether it's a blizzard or these pop-up thunderstorms that we all get once in a while, where the entire region gets inundated with emergency calls. That they really haven't dropped the ball on this. There really has, it's been a seamless transition from that point. We have 24-hour-a-day emergency coverage. Again, there's no empty fire stations, no empty dispatch duties from the fire department. We have immediate radio communications during all incidents. Anytime we have to call for help, we call for anything, calling for extra assistance, we just grab the radio and they answer and we get it. There's no delay. If we had a dispatcher here, they're doing multiple tasks. They sometimes didn't hear us if they're on the phone. We have a whole team of dispatchers in Holbrook that are able to take care of that. 24-hour, 7-day-a-week monitoring of the municipal fire alarm system. That is massive. That was also a major liability when we did not have that, and we have taken care of that. We've got trained and certified emergency medical dispatch instructors and dispatchers. Every call that comes through, whether if it's for a medical emergency, and actually any call that comes through is vetted for COVID type symptoms, whether it's a medical emergency or not. That team is trained and experienced and certified to provide pre-incident, first responders showing up emergency care over the phone to begin life-saving efforts, whether it's CPR, whether it's choking, whether it's simply repositioning a patient. That begins the moment that call is answered. And that's the ideal way to do that. I think Deputy Cutter will talk more in depth on that later, where we really want to get away from transferring any calls if somebody calls in. The first person that answers that phone should be able to give that emergency medical dispatch information without any interruption, so that they can stay with that patient and not have to talk on the radio, not answer another call, not deal with somebody walking into the station. It's ideal. By going to Holbrook in 2012, it allows for all of the firefighter paramedic personnel to be available for direct service for the residents of Abington. Just today, the entire group, the entire shift was out of the station, training up at the Grove, doing ice rescue training. We didn't have to leave somebody back because Holbrook has our back. They're doing our dispatch for us. Abington really became the model for Holbrook in this whole area, followed by Sharon. Sharon Fire was doing some, their dispatch from Holbrook initially. Abington was the real first town, certainly non-Norfolk County town, that began this process, and we've become the model for the area. And since then, Rockland Fire, Whitman Fire, Canton Fire, we still have Sharon Fire, and now we also have Rockland Police, Whitman Police, in addition to Holbrook Fire and Holbrook Police, and a couple of state entities such as the State Hazmat Team and Norfolk County Control, all taken care of through Holbrook Dispatch. It's a great benefit that we've had, and that actually ties our mutual aid partners together with us even better, because if Abington has a fire, Rockland, Whitman, and Holbrook realistically going to be there, and vice versa. They are literally in the same room, all of these entities being dispatched together, and the transfer of information from one department to another by having everybody in the same room really has been ideal. Let's talk about, and then I'm going to finish up, the real meat of what this is about, and it's the cost efficiency. And I enjoy explaining this because I think the numbers speak for themselves why we're doing this. The current FY21 cost breakdown for going to Holbrook for the Abington Fire Department is $21.06 an hour. I don't think I could hire a dispatcher for that, a single dispatcher. That's all we're paying, $21 an hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There are no personnel costs, no benefit costs, no overtime costs, no training costs. It's all included. And I have multiple people for that $21 an hour that are able to provide service for the Abington Fire Department. Like I said, if we had to do this on our own and we had one or two dispatchers, in a typical emergency medical call comes in, one member is immediately on that phone given emergency medical dispatch instructions by state law until we arrive. That even if we had two, that other person now has to field all the other calls, talk to us on the radio, update us. We never had two dispatchers, to be honest with you. It was always one, and there'd be times when we're on the phone with somebody else, the other phone would be ringing. We would have radio traffic coming in. Sometimes a fire alarm box would be coming in at the same time. It was incredibly inefficient, and we simply weren't able to get the job done. Holbrook's new facility has, there's either 8 or 12 stations, all staffed, and they all help each other. And there's many times when we've had multiple dispatchers working on our single call, making this work. One person's dispatching fire, one person's on the phone talking to the caller, other people are on the phones contacting National Grid or whatever entities we need. Somebody else is on a radio requesting mutual aid. There is no way we could do that. The FY22 cost breakdown will be $21.69 an hour. It's a minor increase going up, or that could be zero. And I'm going to defer it to the town manager on those figures later on if the police were to come over. In 2011, myself and the police chief, we did a cost analysis as to explore if Abington was going to do its own dispatchers, because the fire department was in desperate need to do something with our dispatchers. So myself and the police chief were looking at it, and the figures we came up with to hire a pool of dispatchers that would be enough to maintain this 24 hours a day was in the area of $500,000. This is back in 2011. To prorate that now, you're probably realistically about $700,000 for a number of reasons. And those figures were verified by a state 911 official that we met with the other day. Those costs do not include the purchase or updated of specialized equipment, software, a building. We simply don't, I have no place in my station to do this. We physically have no room. We would be looking at adding higher antennas to do this. We're literally looking at the millions of dollars if we were to try to come up with our own version of what we already have at Holbrook that we're only paying $21.06 an hour for all of the residents in Abington. In closing, to move this on, I'd officially like to say that the Abington Fire Department has no desire to leave Holbrook Regional Dispatch and would welcome the Abington Police to join us, because I honestly believe it would improve our responses and efficiency. But I'm going to defer to Chief Cutter on that one, or to Town Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So, Deputy, did you want to speak on this?
Sure. If, Tim, I'm not sure if you've given me permission to share my screen. I'd like to just, if I could, just present a short PowerPoint that I put together just to kind of organize my thoughts. With that PowerPoint, I wanted to, there is a 7-minute video in there, and I think that video hits home some of the deficiencies that we currently are operating with here in Abington. And it involves the Parkland High School shooting down in Florida. But with that, if that's okay, I'll share my screen and kind of go through that presentation, if that's all right.
By all means.
Okay. Okay, so everyone can hear me, I'm guessing? Does everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, all right, sorry. All right, so the first thing I just wanted to touch upon is you know, where State 911 sits. Frank Posniak is the Executive Director of State 911. And his statement is regional centers save money because towns can pool their resources and personnel. They are better able to handle a major incident without being overwhelmed by calls. And they are more able to meet the growing demands of the job, such as having each dispatcher trained in emergency medical instruction. As Chief Nuttall spoke about, you know, it's required by law that we have people that are trained in EMD, emergency medical dispatch. We currently don't have anybody here on staff at the police department that's able to do that. So all of our medical calls that we receive have to be transferred over to Holbrook already. And I will get a little more in depth in that as we go. Second statement by the Executive Director is we view regional centers from a public safety standpoint as a better way to go. And I think that the idea behind this, you know, when we start to think about what's best for the people in Abington, and this is where I come in, is I really do think the system we have now can be improved. And I think that that system can be improved, in fact, by going to a regional center. And it only makes sense at this particular point to go over to Holbrook as our regional center. Just to kind of give you an idea of and the majority of you here might understand this, but just so you know, if we have a home in Abington here and that home dials 911, the way we're handling it currently is all wireless calls are already going to the Holbrook Communication Center. So there's no change in that. I mean, that's the way we've been operating for probably 2 years here in Abington, that all our wireless 911 calls go to Holbrook to begin with. And then what happens is Holbrook takes that call, handles that call, and they send it down to the police department if it's a police-related call. If it was a fire-related call, Holbrook would dispatch right away. But I'm going to talk to you in my wheelhouse, which is on the police end. So Holbrook takes that call, and they have to transfer it to us. It's that transfer that creates the problem. It's that transfer where calls are getting dropped. It's that transfer where communication, where there's confusion with the callers. You know, we got to put ourselves in these callers' shoes sometimes. And when they're dialing 911, obviously, it's probably the worst time in their life, some of the scenarios that they're dealing with. And the more interaction they have to have before they can get a response is the more chance that something negative is going to happen and that response might get disrupted. So it's that second arrow going down to the Abington Police. Now the Abington Police have to handle that call, basically doing the exact same thing that Holbrook did. So you got to imagine from a call person's perception, they had to speak to Holbrook and they had to explain their complaint to Holbrook or their emergency, and then that same person had to then get transferred to the police department and explain their emergency again. And I'll go over that in a little more detail. And then the police department dispatches a cruiser to the house. So you can see that the second arrow is the problem, and that's the transfer. In a more perfect world, in a most efficient response, and this is the response that the fire department is currently operating in, is that 911 cell phone call goes over to Holbrook Regional Communication, and if it was a police-related call and they were dispatching for us, the police car could go directly to the house to respond. Cutting out that second element of having to repeat and transfer calls down to the police station. Here's where I wanted to just have you listen to this situation in Parkland. And I think it's very important to understand that this is exactly the way we have things set up here in Abington. So when they talk about that calls were being transferred, calls were being sent to a dispatch center, and that dispatch center couldn't dispatch police, that's exactly the scenario we have here. So if we put ourselves into a situation where we had a major incident taking place at maybe one of our schools here in Abington, this is what we're going to be dealing with. And I'll play the video.
4 years ago, a frantic call for help launched an 11 Alive investigation, exposing failures in the nation's 911 emergency system.
We're at Stoneman Douglas High School, and I think there's a shooter.
Hello?
Today, many of those same failures still exist.
At that very moment, that these dispatchers aren't even understanding what each other is saying. People are being shot. People were being killed.
4 years ago, 11 Alive's groundbreaking 9/11 investigation revealed stunning weaknesses in the nation's emergency response system.
And even today, all wireless 911 calls are still routed by cell tower location, not the caller's location.
So on this 1-year anniversary of the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, our investigation reveals a delay in finding a caller's exact location is still contributing to massive confusion and lost lives.
And what you're about to see is very difficult to watch, but important to see. It is a life and death problem that needs to be fixed. Here's Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe.
I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1200 building.
Attention all units, possible shots fired at 5901 Pine Island Road at Stoneman Douglas High School.
34 students and teachers were shot before the first officer made entry. The gunman already long gone.
Tango 2, I hear shots fired by the football field. Shots fired by the football field.
Shots fired by the football field.
What you see here turned out to be useless. The deeply flawed response contributed to 17 deaths, according to a state commission. But the failures began before any officers were even dispatched. Back to that very first call to 911, picked up by a cell tower across the street in the next city.
911, what's your emergency?
Hello, we're at Stoneman Douglas High School, and I think there's a shooter.
Hello? You still there?
The caller, under fire, hung up.
Talk to me, please.
The 911 call was answered one city over in Coral Springs, but Parkland relies on Broward County Sheriff's deputies. So the Coral Springs dispatcher transferred the call to Broward 911.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, I just got a call from Douglas High School. A female on the line advised that they believe there's a shooter at the school.
Okay, at Douglas High School in what city?
At that very moment, that these dispatchers aren't even understanding what each other is saying. People are being shot. People were being killed.
And it's secondhand information from a student?
A female called in. It sounded like possible shots in the background.
Okay.
I think I heard 5 or 6 in 2 different bursts.
Nearly a minute passes before the Broward dispatcher realizes she's talking with another dispatcher in a different 911 center.
And you're calling from where?
I'm from Coral Springs.
This was the most preventable tragedy ever.
Max Schachter's 14-year-old son Alex was murdered during the dispatcher's confusion on that first transferred 911 call.
Had you even ever thought of 911 or any of these issues before?
No, I mean, nobody thinks about it. They think that if you dial 911, you're going to get the police and they're going to come help you. Nobody ever thinks that you're going to have to tell your story to one operator, then they're going to have to transfer you to a different operator. It's just ridiculous.
Because of the need to transfer that first 911 call to another dispatch center, the first law enforcement officers weren't notified for at least 69 seconds. By that time, Nicholas Cruz had shot all 24 victims on the first floor and was headed upstairs to shoot more.
Okay. Is the door locked? Okay. Are they getting closer to you?
Yes. So, it wouldn't have saved my little boy, even if it would have been a perfect scenario, because Alex, unfortunately, was the warning shot for the kids on the second floor to run and hide. Alex was one of the first little boys that was murdered.
Okay, does anyone have an address to where I'm sending the police to?
You don't have the address for the high school?
Hold on one moment, just a moment.
There was a school shooting over at Stoneman Douglas. Stoneman Douglas? Yeah. What's the name of the school? In what city?
Parkland.
Parkland what?
Parkland, Stoneman Douglas.
And you said the school is located on Parkland and Douglas?
Stoneman Douglas High School.
Coral Springs received at least 130 911 calls about the shooting.
The hallway, they were shooting into my classroom.
And tried to transfer 4 callers from the Parkland High School to Broward.
Yes, this is Coral Springs with the transfer. This person's advising at the shooter at Douglas and Parkland. The shooter's in the north parking lot.
Okay.
So go ahead for BSO.
Okay. Hello, excuse me. Hello? Hello?
This failed transfer would have alerted police to the shooter getting away.
Where's the location you say the shooter is located at?
He said the student parking lot on the north side of the school.
Okay, what school? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Only one of the 4 transferred callers was still on the line by the time the second 911 center picked up.
Did he have a description of the subject or anything?
I did not get the description before I transferred him. He hung up.
He hung up the phone. Okay.
Every single 911 call from inside Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School went to the neighboring city by design. Parkland chose to route all its cellular 911 calls to Coral Springs on purpose because Parkland contracts with Coral Springs for fire and ambulance, but not police.
If you dial 911 on that phone right now, sitting here in the Parkland Library, where is that call going to go?
It's going to go to Coral Springs.
And Coral Springs still can't send you police. They have to basically call somebody else.
So as soon as this problem was identified, I've been trying to fix this problem. If there's another mass casualty incident tomorrow, we are still going to have to transfer these calls, and people are going to die because of it.
The GPS is showing it was just sitting at the tower.
The closest tower to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School for a cell phone is in Coral Springs. It's across the border. Even without this decision, the natural way that calls are routed, they would have gone to the wrong 911 center anyway.
A national public safety crisis we first revealed 4 years ago, 3 full years before the Parkland shooting.
And even 11 months after 17 people died, including my little boy, we still don't have those things fixed. And I don't want any family to have to go through the pain and anguish that I go through every day.
Max is on the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Commission. He proposes giving every teacher in America trackable key fobs with a panic button that could directly notify local police.
And Aisha, here's another important point we should point out. Most of those students and teachers under fire didn't call or text 911. They sent text messages to family members as far away as New York and Indiana. And the vast majority of those 911 calls were from parents and grandparents in other counties and other states, literally reading texts from their children and grandkids.
This is so alarming here. So Brendan's Lost on the Line series, which dates back 4 years, can be seen on 11alive.com. Watch how it all started or rewatch tonight's powerful investigative story.
We're actually hearing from a
Sorry about this. I'm having some difficulties. Okay, so with that, oh, geez, excuse me. Okay, so I wanted to show that video because I felt that it was exactly, other than maybe some technical issues regarding their cell site towers, but the way they have it set up in Parkland, it's exactly how we have it set up here now in Abington. They had their fire being dispatched from one particular, the dispatch center where all the 911 calls, and their police were being dispatched by someone else. This next slide is what I wanted to do is kind of show you how we're working now, just to give you an idea. And I only went back the last 7 months, but just to give you an idea of where we are as far as what calls. So you'll see that over the last year in 2020, there were 823 fire-related EMS calls that came into the police department. Now, those were all calls that our dispatchers were then required to transfer over to Holbrook, and that's the way it's working now. The problem with that is, as I've stated, is with that transfer becomes situations where callers get disconnected. None of our dispatchers here in Abington can perform EMD, so that time delay during that transfer process before Holbrook picks up and before Holbrook can process the call and before Holbrook can begin to provide EMD instructions, all that is a huge time delay. And for 823 calls this year, That's what that's what the residents of Abington had to do. They had to wait on the line for those calls to get transferred over to Holbrook. Under the same system that we're still operating now, there were 1,628 calls that Holbrook had to transfer to the police department. So these were 1,600 calls where people were looking for a police response, and they had to wait to go through the transfer, and they had to wait to go through the process of telling their story twice. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you can see that where the problem is, or where the problem lies in our current system, with all these calls that are getting transferred around, as opposed to being able to be directly dispatched. When Holbrook picks up a call, this is common. What is verified when they answer a 911 call. So it starts out 911. This call is recorded. What is your emergency? And I just made up a fake person, but oh my, someone just came in and robbed me. Holbrook will then go through and say, okay, what is your address? This example was 2 Brockton Ave in Abington. Okay, what's your callback number? The person has to recite the callback number. Okay, what is your name? The person has to give their name. Now you got to imagine that this is an emergency situation taking place. And this stuff is all required by state 911 for Holbrook to get this information on this police related call before they can transfer it. And then they say, okay, Mary, stay on the line with me and don't hang up. Now, I've been here in Abington since 911 first came into the town. And I was here when when it transferred over to E911 when we started to get address information and location information. And at the same time, I was also a trainer for state 911, training new dispatchers in how to handle 911 calls. And this was one of the biggest lines that I always emphasized, was this last line, which is, okay, Mary, stay on the line with me. Don't hang up, stay on the line. Because what happens is in those emergency situations, as I stated, these people don't hear a lot on the other end. They're thinking that they called 911 and they're thinking that a response is coming. But in this particular case, over 1,600 calls, I think it was last year, Holbrook had to go through this whole process and then the call gets transferred. What we worry about at this point is the disconnect. So while that call is being transferred, a lot of times there's a click heard on the phone. There's a little bit of a sound that's heard on the other end of the line. And a lot of these callers think that the state 911 has hung up on them and they hang up. If they remain on the line, when we pick up here at the police station, we again go through the exact same thing, and we're required to do this. 911, this call is recorded. What is your emergency? And we go through each and every one of those things. So you can imagine the frustration that we're presenting with the callers when they have to repeat themselves twice before we can even start to dispatch a response. One of the benefits of Holbrook being able to dispatch a response is when this information is being gathered in Holbrook, they could have a second dispatcher already on the radio starting to head a police car in that direction. So that even back when we first had a system of Abington Police was always the primary PSAP, primary public safety answering point, and the fire department was designated as a secondary. So when we first got 911 in town, we would take all our 911 emergency calls and we would transfer them, all the medical and fire related calls, we would transfer to the fire department. And I could, back then I was still working the desk. I was firsthand knowledge about all the problems that were associated with that. And I was a strong advocate to not do that at the time, but it just wasn't feasible at the time. But now we have a chance to change things and fix the system so that we don't have something that happens like in Parkland. The other thing that, obviously I'm still moving forward with the management study and trying to fix some of those suggestions under Chapter 3 under the organization section. MRI further recommends that the reorganization includes the transitioning to a system of staffing that allows civilianization of dispatch and the reassignment of officers from dispatch to patrol and investigative duties as applicable. A couple things, or a bunch of things that, in speaking with Director Hook over there at Holbrook, these are some of the things that Abington has the chance of gaining. They're already beginning to set up things for a propagation study to identify any radio coverage needs or upgrades that we need. We've had some talk about having some dead spots towards the Brockton line. and in the city of Brockton. And as well, they're talking about possibly providing us. Now, you got to remember that this is all free of charge, that there would be increase in our coverage by maybe acquisitioning new radio sites in Rockland and or Brockton to help expand our coverage. I've already spoken to them about updating some of our late model police portable radios. I got a meeting tomorrow to just set up for an estimate, just to figure out what would be required to install a generator at our Chestnut Street site. At our Chestnut Street water site, water tower, there is no generator on site. So we're thinking about, we would obviously want to have our system built for power loss. There's also, we would need to wire in some separate circuits and have a dedicated electrical circuit for the Chestnut Street site. We would be, Holbrook, as part of the grant process, we would be looking at purchasing the latest MDT mobile data terminal tablets for all our police vehicles. We would be looking at purchasing some new radio cabinetry for some of our remote sites on Lincoln Street and or Chestnut Street. The town currently, or the water department has a generator. They have a fairly new generator up at the Lincoln Street water tower, but our radio system is not connected into that. So I would be looking at either seeing to get permission to connect into that generator in case of a power loss and or installing our own generator at the Lincoln Street site. I've also talked to them about encrypting a dedicated detective channel for the radio. We don't have that now. That would be a nice feature for our detectives to be able to talk privately and do their work on a different channel. And we've been talking about upgrading our whole system to some type of a simulcast system, which will give us better coverage throughout the town on our radio. And again, all free of charge. The other thing is we do have several different sites in town. We have the Station 2 for the fire department. We have a receiver there. We have a receiver on Chestnut Street, and we have a repeater on Lincoln Street. We would be looking at trying to build some redundancy into our system so that if one leg of that system goes down, that a second leg would kick in and allow us to have seamless communication throughout the town and have no situation where we lose coverage at any time. The other thing we've experienced here is we do not have 24/7 monitoring of our radio system, and we would be looking at upgrading the system through the grant process to be able to give us 24/7 monitoring of our radio. So, for instance, I've had situations here where one of our receiver sites have gone down, and we have to wait until someone notices a problem with communication, and then we begin to investigate what the situation might be, and then we find out there's a problem with the system. Under the new way, the new system would automatically be generating emails as soon as something went wrong in the system. So that would be huge to us. Excuse me. Another thing that we've talked about is dedicating a microwave link for phone communication, basically between us and Holbrook. So there really would be no delay in those times where we do want to communicate with Holbrook, that there'd be no delay and would have a dedicated microwave link to be able to do that. And, we've talked about putting one of these direct communication lines in our dispatch area now, also in the sergeant's office, and probably in the operations rooms. One thing with improved tablets in the cruisers, I'd like to look, and this is again comes out of the management study, but look towards electronic citations. So I'm hoping that if we upgrade some of our tablets in the cars, that we can then begin to explore the options for electronic citations. And I think that's on that. I wanted to just bring up the way, if we were to go over to Holbrook, how I would benefit personally here as a department with offices. Currently, and under the MRI study, they said that we have sufficient positions at 31. For this FY21, I had 30 positions funded. We lost one of those positions due to some budget cuts. So I would obviously be looking to return back to that 31 number. And again, according to the MRI study, that's what they recommend. And I'd be looking for FY22 to be able to do that. Right now, with a combination of civilian dispatches and offices, we have 2 offices that are required to work the desk during the week here. So it leaves us with 29 dedicated to police work, and 2 are working the desk. Currently, I have 28 because I'm down that 1 position. But if I was back up to 31 positions, it would leave us with 29, but currently I have 28. Civilian dispatches, I have 1 full-time and 3 part-time dispatches. If we made the move to Holbrook, it would be perfectly fine to drop down to 30 officer positions instead of the 31, because I would have 2 no longer that are required to work the desk. So I would get those 2 more officers out on the road doing police work. So it would be a win for me to be able to do that. And then what I'd also be looking to do is hire 4 additional part-time dispatches to give me coverage. So it would give me 2 more officers out on the road, and it would give me, I'd be increasing part-time dispatches by 4. Just a money breakdown, if I reduce 1 sworn officer, it's for my personal budget, it's $70,000 basically, roughly. And if I add 4 part-time civilian desk officers, it would be a cost of $37,440 in addition to what my budget is today. So we would, in the budget that at the police department, it would be a $32,000 net monetary gain for me in the budget, and I would be getting 2 additional officers out on the road. So this just again reiterates that police officers are dedicated police work under the plan, which is 30, which is 2 more than what I currently have. And the other benefit to me is the civilian staff that I did hire and the ones that I currently have working now could be cross-trained to perform other duties here in the station. There could be light administrative work that they could do. I could also use them for matron work if I did have a female work in the desk. Currently, we're required to call someone in for those duties, and I'm required to have matrons on duty for that. But this would then give me that ability to be able to at least have some coverage for those duties as well. One thing that I've always been advocating is that I think we're reaching the point here in Abington that 1 dispatcher is not enough. Chief Nuttall spoke about, he only had 1 dispatcher on the desk way back when, and we've had 1 dispatcher on the desk for the last 30 years and prior to that. And in those 30 years that I've been here, I can only tell you that the call volume has increased. I looked today, and I think 2020 logged in our dispatch software is about a little over 18,000 calls in our dispatch software, and most of those calls are being logged by a dispatcher. So I think we're getting to the point that we need to start to, if we're not going to regionalize and not rely upon the fact that there's 3 or 4 dispatches that could help out at any given time over in Holbrook, that we really need to begin to think about increasing our own civilian dispatcher or dispatcher coverage in the department, especially during the busy times between the 8 a.m. shift until midnight. Midnight to 8 is still probably satisfactory to have 1 person working the desk, but legitimately for 16 hours, we would have to increase. We should be considering increasing to at least 2 dispatches. I think a lot of towns around us, I know Rockland, I believe, had 2 working the desk, and they've had 2 working the desk for the last 10 years. And our call volumes are similar to Rockland. I know there's several other communities in the area that have 2 dispatches. So that just in and of itself, if I had to increase to 4 full-time dispatches to cover, I'd be looking at roughly $259,000 to do that in today's dollars in staffing. Just to kind of hit home where we're heading and what's going on right now, and I can't emphasize this enough, all of our 911 wireless calls are already going to Holbrook. And you can see from this trend that 59% of all people, well, basically 39% have a working landline telephone in their home, and that number is steadily decreasing. And even if there's a landline phone in the home, it doesn't necessarily mean that those people in that house aren't still operating with a cell phone. And when an emergency happens outside in the yard or emergency happens in their car, that they're not using their cell phone as well. But basically, to hit home that the trend is the landline phones are decreasing and the cell phone calls are increasing. And the way the system is currently set up here in Abington, all of our cell phone calls are already going to Holbrook. Fire and EMS calls are then already dispatched directly through Holbrook, so there's no response delay. Police-related calls start at Holbrook Com, and then they require a transfer to the Abington Police Department, who then dispatches a response. This again increases delays in the system. All landline calls, 40% of homes keep landlines, are routed through Abington Communications. Police calls are then dispatched directly through Holbrook. That's a correction. Police calls should then are then dispatched directly through Abington, the way we have it working now, but all fire and EMS calls have to get transferred. So if it's a fire or an EMS call, we're delaying calls because we have to transfer them. And currently in the system, if Holbrook takes the police calls, they have to transfer. I think one thing I wanted to hit home and make sure that everyone understood was what a move like this to go over to Holbrook, what is it not going to affect? The Abington Police Department will still be fully staffed with a person 24/7 for any walk-in complaints or emergencies if someone wanted to walk in here. And that's just like we do it now. Someone will be here, someone will be in at the lobby window, and someone will be able to speak to a person. The Abington Police Department will have a person at the police station answering business line calls for information, just like we do now. That will not change. It will be staffed 24/7, and there'll be someone here to answer the phone or walk in. If an emergency walks into the police station, the desk officer that I do have assigned here will be able to immediately dispatch a police response. So even if we talk about, well, we're gonna allow Holbrook to dispatch our police response, that in no way means that we can't dispatch ourselves from the police station. We will maintain all our equipment here at the police station. And if we had an emergency walk in, our desk officers will be trained and have the ability to immediately dispatch a police response. And again, we're looking at a dedicated microwave linked phone line to immediately reach Holbrook should we need to contact them for something else. So with that, that is the end of that presentation. And let me just... So yeah, so with that, that's the end of my talk on it. I think ultimately, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't think it was going to give us a better service for the residents of Abington, and that's really what my drive is the service end of things. And I really do think the people dialing 911 and the people handling emergencies and those future emergencies that might come in are going to be handled in a more efficient and professional manner, having the availability of multiple dispatches to be able to handle some serious emergencies.
Thank you, Deputy. One quick question for you. The current dispatches that we have now, will they lose their jobs?
No, the thought is, and I've been speaking with Scott, and we've both been talking about this, but no, absolutely not. We would keep everyone on board that we have on board now. There'd be absolutely no change in that. And then, like I said, the only thing I would be looking at is a small increase. I'd be looking at not funding that 31st position and using half of that money to be able to add 4 part-time positions over and above what I have right now.
Okay, so when you say there's somebody walks in the station, there's always a person there. Is there always a sworn officer there?
No, currently the way we have it, Tim, because I do have 1 full-time civilian dispatcher and I have 3 part-time civilian dispatchers, on the midnight to 8 shift, it's every night is covered by a civilian dispatcher. So if you walked in during that period, you wouldn't have a sworn officer. And then during the day shift, I have 1 part-time civilian dispatcher. So if you walked in on when he's working, you wouldn't have an officer there. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't an officer maybe in the station. It's just that they're not assigned to the station. So in most cases, a lot of my supervisors, the sergeants that work in the shift, they really, they're on the road, but they have so many administrative jobs to do that a lot of times they are sitting at their desk, which is right behind the dispatch area. So even if we, as we have civilians sitting there, we generally have an officer that's still in the station that can respond right away to the lobby at any time.
Thank you for clarifying. Does anybody else from the board have questions for the deputy?
I have a couple, Jim.
Go ahead.
Actually, you answered my calls. I was wondering where the cell phones went. and I did answer that, and you answered the landline. But when someone calls in either a cell phone or a landline, does it show up on the screen in Holbrook where that call is coming from?
Yes, yeah, that's been taking place for, the technology's been there to support that for a while with landline phones, especially, and then the technology in the last few years has been moving to support it with cell phones. So yes, every cell phone has a chip or whatever in it that identifies where it is, and that information is in Holbrook. And when they transfer the call to us, we also get that information.
Okay. How many towns are in the Holbrook system now?
Well, I believe there's 6 fire departments, and there's Rockland Police is there, and I believe to some extent the Whitman Police Department has some of their calls being answered over there.
Steve or Chief Nuttall, can you answer that? How many towns are involved in this?
Director Hook, are you on this? I knew he had a.
Yes, so I can answer it. Good evening, everybody. Steve Hook, Holbrook Communications Director. So we currently dispatch 6 communities, 8 agencies, and we take all the 911 calls for the town of Holbrook, at Rockland and Whitman.
Okay. And how many people are on in one shift?
Depends on the shift, but between 5 and 6. One being the supervisor.
How many calls on a typical day or a week or however you keep track of it?
Calls for service, maybe 90, 100.
Per day?
Yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Not for me.
Jim, nothing? So I have a question. Our current setup for Deputy Chief Cutter, how many years have we had our current setup, the police setup we have now?
Well, the most recent change, Kevin, I believe was about 2 years ago when the decision was made to transfer our wireless 911 calls to Holbrook. So that was the most recent change. But other than that, everything's been in place for quite some time now.
So to transfer the 911 to Holbrook, was there an issue that started that transfer, or was that just something that happened at the time? Do you know?
I'm not too familiar with it. I just believe that at some point a decision was made at the town manager's level to sign off and send those 911 wireless calls over there.
All right. And then as far as our setup now, what issues have we had that you can relate? Have we had issues where we haven't gotten to a call in time, or what major issues are prompting this necessary that we need to switch?
On my end, no, I can't point to any particular issue where we haven't been able to handle currently. But my fear is that it's really just going to take either a couple incidences coming in at one time, 2 or 3 incidences that might come in, or one major incident that comes in, and that would be my fear, that we would not be able to handle those calls adequately enough. But currently, the way we've been doing it, I'm satisfied that our desk officers and our civilian dispatchers are doing the job that they're there to do.
All right, and then, I'm maybe a little rough here on this, but the state police kind of operates the same way. If you're calling, 911, the state police intercepts, and then they would direct you to the town if they had on the fire department or whatnot. That kind of the general idea.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, all our 911 wireless calls began with the state police, and then they would get transferred out to each individual municipal town or city. But that changed, like I said, 2 or 3 years ago, where the technology was able to support individual 911 calls being directed to individual call centers. So that changed. But yes, currently, I believe if you're operating on the highway, I'm a little ignorant to exactly how it works, but I believe that those calls are transferred. The state police operate, I know, at least 2 or 3 regional call centers where all their calls are going into a regional center, and then they are transferring them out or moving them out to somewhere or dispatching. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay. And what would be, I know I've heard a lot tonight and stuff. What is the actual, the difference in call time or call response that we would gain from Holbrook? Is there like a magical number that we're seeing that we're gonna gain like 30 seconds a minute? Have we done a study to see that yet?
No, I think in looking at the Parkland shooting there, I think they said that it was 69 seconds until they were able to get a police response dispatched. From other information that I've gathered, I believe the transfer process and all that, you're losing about a minute and 20 to 30 seconds per call, 911 call. But personally, I haven't done any type of specific study to see what that delay is, but I believe it's around a minute to a minute and a half, having it go through one center and then having to get transferred. A lot of the delay, and I tried to point that out, was just the fact that the information gathering is redundant, that one agency has to gather. First of all, they have to realize when that initial call comes in, they have to figure out, is this a police-related call? Is it a fire-related call, or is it EMS? So it takes a little bit of that phone conversation to figure out where exactly or what agency is going to handle it. And then they have to go through and verify all the information that pops up on their screen, including location, name, callback number, and things like that. So that's inherently where the delay begins. And then the other problem with that is just the transfer itself, because a lot of those people don't stay with the call. They end up disconnecting. And now you have one dispatcher talking to another dispatcher trying to relay that information. I think in that Parkland video, I think they said there was somewhere of over 30 calls that were made from students and faculty at the school. And I believe only one successfully transferred to Broward County. And that's the fear that we have, is that we're going to lose that information if those are the rates of transfer calls that actually make it through during a situation like that.
And I did, yeah, part of that video, what I took from that too was Parkland basically sent to Coral Springs, and Coral Springs had to send it to Broward. So it actually went through 3 dispatch centers to get dispatched, if you will. But so, and I've always been a proponent of, increasing our dispatchers here, which I'll get to after my questions. But when that information comes over, much like I think you already said, Deputy Chief, if we had more civilian dispatchers on, it would allow more of our officers on the road. And it would also have a secondary dispatcher in the police department that would actually see that screen come up, like you said, with some of that information, and could start dispatching. I think you did hit on that. So I think that's great if we could do that here. Now, as far as officers, I was doing some research, talking to a few different people, and it seems like the general consensus is they're worried about, they're just worried about this. They're worried about safety. Have you spoken to the officers, and what was their input on this? Are they open to this, or?
I guess we'll go back to, this has been part of negotiations for several contracts now. I believe the contract before the last contract that was signed with the union, they used to have a station officer position. We didn't have language for civilian dispatches. So in the last 2 contracts, there's been some movement to get us to this point today where we can bring over we can completely civilianize dispatch for more efficient operations. So, but currently, no. There was some talk with the union president, and his concern was to just make sure that we do our due diligence and look at everything involved. And I think that we are doing that. And that was really the only concern on that end. I think I wouldn't even say, I'd say more than half are perfectly fine with not doing dispatch duties. And then there's probably a small percentage of officers that still like to do some dispatch duties. So they would be a little more reluctant to give that up. But at this particular point, with the union and all that, it's already been negotiated out of the contracts over the last 2 contracts. And so that's where we stand with that.
And I understand that, we did, like you said, that negotiation happened. We did have some civilians interjected into there. We still have the 2 officers. So, I'd like to see us get those 2 officers on the road, and let's hire some more civilian dispatchers. I like the setup that we have. I don't know necessarily. I think we need to maybe slow this down a little bit and take a harder look at this. But I would like to see us create more jobs in town and not be able to get, jobs out of town. So, and there was a lot of calls, 1,600 calls that Holbrook sent to the police department. So, it is a busy thing there, double the calls that we sent to Holbrook, if you will, for the year. So there's a lot of stuff. I did see the list of stuff, the acquisition of radio sites and stuff you were saying like that. I'd like to see, will that be written into an agreement that we would have that they would be doing all the stuff for us, or is this just proposals that they will look at doing?
At this point, Kevin, we're really just looking at everything. But ultimately, all those what I threw up there as possible proposals would have to be written down in grant form to go to State 911 to get approved. So all of that would be written. All of that would be signed off on. And but at this point, again, just to I'm going to meet with someone to just give me some ideas on generators. I'm just looking to gather information and looking to see what the costs of something like that are and how much we are saving. Just as depending on how fast this moves forward. But yeah, everything would be in writing that I propose.
And if I could just jump in there for a minute, we did have a meeting with the woman from the state who deals with the grants and the granting opportunities. And she did sort of spell out to us that is where the grants will be going, is mostly towards regional expansion. They have two, and I think Steve can probably maybe explain it better than I, but I guess they have two, phase 1 and phase 2 or something of the grant when they come in. And phase 1 is what their priority is, and that is enhancing existing regional centers. So bringing someone like us into another regional center and putting that money into that infrastructure, as opposed to our other question to her was, hey, can we get some of the money? Can we get the grant money and expand our center? And the answer on that was no. And we said, all right, well, what if we wanted to regionalize? She said, sure, but you certainly wouldn't be a priority to set up your own center. Matter of fact, we would not necessarily encourage it because there are so many established around you that they would be the priority.
So, and again, this is something like I've always been for is doing our own regional center. I did ask you last meeting, I know everything's kind of going quick here because we just have this on the agenda just the next meeting. I did ask you if you could reach out and have the other regional centers on as well. Is this grant only given for Holbrook, or are other regional centers also getting it? So I'd like to hear from all of them if we are. Or are we just specifically focusing on Holbrook? Is there a certain distinction in it that we're doing Holbrook?
I'll chime in here, but I believe the main reason would be because fire's already at Holbrook. So I think that's why we've been, obviously on my end, wherever fire is, police should be. We really shouldn't be separated in two different locations. So I think that, and Chief Nuttall, if you want to comment on that, but ultimately you've been over there in Holbrook for quite some time, and that would be the main reason why we'd be focused on Holbrook.
Absolutely. If I can chime in on this too, I agree, Chief. I have no desire to pull out of Holbrook. I think that would be dangerous for my personnel. As I said, all of our infrastructure is in Holbrook. It is proven and they're professional and effective. But beyond that, all of our neighboring mutual aid partners, Rockland, Whitman, Holbrook themselves, are with the Holbrook Dispatch. They're literally in the same room together. There is zero lag time or miscommunications when if Abington has a fire or massive motor vehicle accident or what have you, they're coming. They're literally in the same room, contacting that other department right there. We're basically a city department, the way we're operating right now. And Holbrook is the fire alarm. If you look at the city of Brockton, all of those surrounding stations are like a little town. And in the middle, tying them all together in the network hub, is the Brockton fire alarm. That is what Holbrook is. Call comes in and they dispatch whatever station, engine, ladder company to the appropriate address. That's exactly what we have now. I have a fire in Abington. It goes to Holbrook Dispatch. Rockland, Whitman, Holbrook, whichever is in the closest district, whichever we're asking for, whichever's on a running card, including Weymouth and Brockton and outer towns as well, are going to get dispatched, and they're going to get dispatched seamlessly. I would have no interest whatsoever in moving our operations to any of the other regional centers simply because our partners aren't there. There's nothing wrong with the other centers. I think they're actually, they cost more, to be honest with you. I think we're getting the most cost-effective service we're going to get right now, and I think that can continue, and I think that's going to even improve if the Abington police go over there. But the fire department has absolutely no interest in leaving Holbrook, and I would, you know, we'd be doing some serious study on what is the reason against Holbrook. I'm not sure if that there is one. I'm not sure, you know, what the interest. It's almost like you don't want to go to Holbrook. It's a proven thing. It's there. It's cost effective. It's kind of a no-brainer to me. I think the reason, you know, I know that Kevin brought up slowing it down, and I'm going to defer to Scott on this if he wants to say kind of the reason for that. We're trying to get, if this were to move through, there is a deadline to try to get some of the proposals signed so that Holbrook could at that point apply them towards the grant to get this thing moving. That's, I think, why there's I don't want to call it urgency, but there's a deadline. We're trying to move this forward. If we're going to do it, otherwise we lose an entire year. And, you know, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is the service for the residents of Abington and for the taxpayers of Abington. That's what this is about. We're trying to make a better, efficient service without these transfers. And quite frankly, if Scott gets into the funding on this, this is going to be the most cost-effective way for the next several years for the entire town, for all of the taxpayers. I think we're all trying to do our due diligence for the residents and the taxpayers of Abington. That should be the number one priority.
Yeah, and Kevin, I did reach out to Duxbury's version of a regional center, The Rock, and I talked to the director there, and I actually and I reached out to him because I was project manager when that project started, and I have, you know, I was, you know, very familiar with the dispatch over there. So I did ask him, you know, what were his thoughts on it, and he said, you know, yeah, absolutely, you know, we have room and we'd bring you in, but it doesn't make any sense unless you're bringing fire over with you. It makes no sense. We could look at it and we could compete with the grant or the offer that you're getting from Holbrook, but why would you want to do that? It, you know, even to them, it didn't make sense. And, you know, as far as the urgency goes, yes, I mean, when I got into the discussion with the two, with the chief and the deputy chief on this, when I realized what we're doing, the inefficiencies of this, that's what brought this to me to say, we absolutely have to deal with this. We can't keep it this way. And we have to do it now. Now, there's an opportunity in front of us that you know, when we did start looking into it, you know, we have a deadline as far as when we want to get involved in this. And so that's why it's in front of the board. That's why I brought it to you last meeting and why we wanted to bring it again this meeting. Again, I'm looking for, you know, I'm not looking for a vote from the board. I'm really just looking for some sort of consensus on whether the board thinks this is a good direction to go in. You know, and the best I can do is, and like the chief said, is bring our opinions to you as, you know, the two public safety officers for the town, and as a town manager to say to you that we have a problem, we know how to fix it, and we want to fix it. And the money part of it is great, but it was really our last concern. It was, you know, safety for the citizens, and officer safety was a huge part of it too. So, and the fact is that, as they said, and I'll be happy to run over the numbers with you, it'll save the town $500,000 or so plus. That's not even including, you know, capital improvements that could be made on the communication system.
But where are the other than Duxbury, Holbrook, what are the other locations?
I'll let the chief answer. I think it's in, is it in Hingham or Cohasset?
Yeah, they call it the Shrek, the South Shore one, which is the towns of Norwell, Hingham, Cohasset, and I think it's Hull. They have one there, that's their own fire and police. I'm not quite sure they're looking to have other towns join into that, to be honest with you.
I
That's
was
kind
just
of.
asking, regionally, Holbrook makes more sense if we're gonna do it. It definitely makes more sense, in my opinion, to go to Holbrook. And not Duxbury and not Norwell and not Cohasset and not Hull.
So, and another thing, so I was looking, our PSAP, our public safety answering point. I know, Scott, I think you had done some research on this. We would be giving this up if we transferred to Holbrook, is that correct?
Yeah, that was a big question that I had, really, it is and that's, generally why we brought it to the selectmen to sort of run it by you guys too, is it's a big deal. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's not coming back. So when we make this agreement with Holbrook or whoever we might make it with, we may, if we find that there's an issue or we're not happy with it, our option is to deal with it. And it's to deal with it with the entity that we are contracted with, or to go to another entity that has a PSAP. But it's not likely that unless we were to go and create our own regional communication center, it's not likely that it will be coming back.
Yeah,
so it is a permanent move. And but that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that doesn't make it a bad move. It's just that's why we're spending and doing, spending our time and doing our due diligence on it. There are, and I think, I'll let the chiefs or Steve kind of address how issues will be dealt with if we do enter into the agreement. But yeah, it's not, once it's done, it's not coming back.
Yeah, so once we get rid of it, we would transfer it. Basically, Holbrook would take over, and then if we had an issue we wanted to leave Holbrook, it would be more of we either work it out with Holbrook or we have to find or go to another PSAP at that point.
We would have to go, yeah. And this was a discussion that I did have with the representative from the state. Yeah, they would work very hard to figure it out, to fix it, but ultimately we would be going either, if it didn't get fixed or we weren't happy with the resolution, we would end up going somewhere else.
And is that through the 911 commission, like the state 911 commission?
Yeah.
So they would basically, we would be going through them at that point.
If it got to a certain point that we had some sort of huge issue that we couldn't resolve, and I do believe, like I said, I'm sure the deputy chief can address it better on what their resolution process would be if we had a problem. But ultimately, the folks at E911, the state would get involved if it got to a point, and if they couldn't find resolution for it, if we were just that unhappy that we wanted out, then yeah, we would end up going to either another regional center, or we'd be forced to create our own, which wouldn't likely happen.
Yeah, and if I could just add, a couple questions I posed to Steve last week. One was, Steve, in his experience operating this regional center in Holbrook, has any problem risen to the level of where that town considered pulling out of his regional dispatch center? And that answer was absolutely no. Like with anything, there are going to be bumps in the road, and I'm prepared for that. And I will do my due diligence to prepare the offices that there may be bumps in the road, but there's bumps in the road when we hire a new civilian dispatcher here. Change is always a little difficult for people to understand sometimes. But most definitely with Holbrook, there hasn't been any community that has pulled out of there or even contemplating pulling out of there since they've been in operation. The other thing is I wanted to make sure was, what is the process if we are unhappy with some of the services that have taken place in Holbrook? And one thing that gave me some comfort was in speaking to the deputy chief in Rockland, Deputy Chief Aramo. He had told me that, like with anything, there were some small bumps in the road, and that his supervisors and the supervisors over at Holbrook worked together. They had authority in both ends to reach out to each other and work out any problems that they did have, and I think all those problems were worked out. And so that process, the other thing that Holbrook's offering is that They will bring some of their dispatchers over here to Abington to make sure that we can put a face with a name, and so that when my officers are out there calling someone, that they know who they're actually speaking to. And Steve has been more than generous to offer their attendance at my staff meetings so that my supervisors can get to know them, and as well as a ride-along program so that his dispatchers are riding along with our officers to even solidify that relationship even more. And the other thing I spoke with Steve about is, okay, Steve, what happens when we do have a problem? And is there anything in writing, any type of a formal process that is in writing if we made this jump to Holbrook? And the answer was yes. There's and I don't remember the exact name, but there is an agreement that gets signed between Holbrook and the town. And there's a written process and a formal process for any type of a grievance that we may have. So that made me feel a little at ease that at least there is a process in place, and it's a written process if we did have a problem.
If I could just jump in quickly too, and again, we've been there since 2012. We gave up our secondary PSAP. We do not miss that because it was it was kind of releasing the handcuffs to us. It just made it that much more flawless in everything. We've been there since 2012. We have not had any problems with it. There's always bumps in the road. There were a lot of growing pains. We also opened up a fire station in the middle of already being dispatched from Holbrook. Not an issue. We're going on almost 10 years with them, 9 years with that. We haven't had an issue. And like I said, the last thing we'd want to do is pull out. Historically, it's been proven in Abington.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, at this point, where would you go, right? I mean, if Abington Fire was to pull out right now, would we be able to take it back into Abington, or no? We'd have to go to another dispatch center at that point, Chief.
Probably have to go to another dispatch center, mainly because I have no room in the station to do it with the equipment. But there are other ones further out. But then that's a problem because we're getting away again from the area mutual aid towns like I've talked about. They're not going to leave.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying because the PSAP for Abington Fire was given up the secondary, but you would still fall under the Abington Police PSAP in that avenue, or no?
Yes.
Understandable. And I know some numbers you sent out today, Scott. Is the grant, how long would the grant be for, and how long would like a contract be for? Would that all be up for negotiation?
So what I sent the board earlier was a proposal that I got from Holbrook Regional. And as you can see, it's a 5-year proposal. The first 3 years are zero cost to the town, where the grant would pick up the current fee that the town is paying is approximately $185,000.
For the fire.
Just for fire. The proposed assessment in year one to do police and fire for year one is $340,000. That would be paid through the grant. Year two, the assessment proposed for police and fire is $350,200. That 100% would be paid for through a grant. The year three, got $360,000 for both police and fire. The cost of the town would be zero. That would also be paid for 100% through the grant. In year four, the proposed assessment for police and fire would be $371,527. The cost to Abington would be 50%, or $185,000. So in year four, we would be paying what we paid this year, but we would have 3 free years, and we would be paying half of the cost in year four. Year five, it jumps up. We would pay $287,000, which is 75% of the cost. And these are just what as we said, these are our administrative fees, our assessment. There are other things that will get covered or picked up by the grant. And again, these are things maybe Director Hook can speak to, but improvements to our radios over the years, improvements to the microwaves as needed, improvements in the cruises, as the deputy chief mentioned, with the mobile devices and what they work or how they operate. You know, like I said, the savings to the town over that period, it's you know, it'll be well beyond $500,000 when you add everything up.
Yeah, so I see that initial savings, which is great. I do see that proposed assessment fee continuously goes up every single year, right? 10,000, 10,000, 11,000, 11,000, and then after year 5, you know, obviously things get more expensive, but it seems like it's consistently going up. So I'm curious as to what that would be, say, 10 years from now. Will we continuously raising that cost to residents?
Could I address that? If you don't mind, again, this is, I'm not trying to take over the police thing, but just with the history with us, they've been able to hold the cost to less than 3% or about 3% consistently, which actually helps us because there's very few hidden added costs that if we had our own, you never know what's going to break, or software licensing costs, what have you, go up. So this is traditional. This is pretty much the same formula we've had since 2012. The other thing, again, I just want to remind everyone with looking at the figures the town managers just gave, yeah, by year 6, which is 2026, we'd be looking at paying the full amount, which is probably about $385,000 in that realm, if it was a full dispatch of Abington Fire and Abington Police. I just want to remind everybody that back in 2011, when myself and Chief Majensky did our cost estimate, what it would be to hire dispatchers for Abington Fire, Abington Police, back then it was $500,000. And that number now is prorated up to about 700, which again was verified by the state 911 official that we met with the other day. We're simply not doing, I'm sorry?
And that doesn't include keeping up the equipment.
Correct, and that doesn't include the equipment. We're not even hitting the numbers that we came up with in 2011, and we're into 2026 by going through Holbrook. We're simply not doing a service to the residents at that point, in my opinion, financially, as well as professionally, with what they're able to give us that we simply could not do on our own.
Understandable. I mean, the hope would be that we would be able to get grants as well somewhere along the lines, but I'm with you on that.
Anything further, Kevin?
Nope. I think I've said everything.
Mike, you want to give us your point of view?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry. So I started in 2013, so I don't know anything else other than Holbrook dispatching for the fire department. I've really had no issues with them. You know, there's some mistakes here and there. It's mostly because it's a new person. You know, there's been a time where the tone's gone off and, oh, it's not for this town. It happens. And if I'm being honest with you, those are the things that have happened in my experience. Never really delayed a call or anything like that. Again, just I haven't had any issues dealing with Holbrook dispatching us. And that's just from a firefighter's standpoint.
So, Mike, like on like a call that gets dispatched that's to you guys that's for the wrong town, what would you guys do at that point? You guys,
we would stand down if it wasn't for us. You know, we'd say, oh, that street's not in our town. You know, and usually they catch it before we even have to say anything. They'll say, oh, sorry, you know, disregard. Maybe it's happened 3 or 4 times in the 7 years that I've been there. You know, mistakes happen, but it wasn't anything costly.
Thanks, Mike. Was there anybody else that was waiting to speak on this issue? Anybody from the public want to speak? Give me a hand raise or some sort of sign that you're looking to speak. I'm not seeing anything. Anybody else seeing anything I'm missing? No. All right, so Scott, what you're looking from us is just a consensus. You're not really looking for a motion or a vote or anything, correct?
No, it doesn't require a vote, but I think, generally, I think if everybody's in favor of it, I would like to go forward and, continue to pursue it with the chief and the deputy chief and move on.
I mean, my personal, I'd say to continue to look at it, and I'll continue to keep listening to people from town. I've had a couple people that are very against it. I've had a lot of people that say, I still want to watch this meeting and find out more. So, to me personally, having worked dispatch for a few years and having, seen the town budget, the money seems like a no-brainer to save the money. As far as Mike's talking about 3 or 4 mistakes in 7 years, I probably made that on one shift. So I'm not seeing that being an issue, but I don't know. I'd like to talk to the officers too. We've worked so hard to repair the relationships. I would hate to, burn it with one move. And also maybe talk to some Rockland officers and see how they feel about how it's been working out for them. So, but I definitely wouldn't discourage you from continuing to go in that direction.
I'd be the same. I'd like to hear, again, on Facebook today, just seeing some residents commenting. So I'd like to, I was hoping to see some residents on tonight, but hear from the officers, maybe reach out to Rockland officers, hear from them. But yeah, keep the conversations going and look at it. But I'd also, on the same side, like to look at finishing civilian dispatch at the police department and getting those officers back out on the road in our town.
Yeah, I'll keep the board up to date on it. Like I said, we're under we're under a bit of a time frame here. So I will let you know, but I think that, despite or unless we were to run into some serious issue or something coming up, I think we're more likely than not to enter into this agreement.
Yeah, and I would recommend that you keep working that way, as if it, because maybe if I hear, something in the next 2 days that everybody saw this presentation and said, well, that's a terrible idea. And I might come back and say, maybe we rethink this, but
sure.
It doesn't seem to be.
I agree with that.
Yeah, looks like there was some Rockland residents on those Facebook threads today that were talking about safety, and there's some interesting stuff. So I'd like to see how it progresses over the next few days, and if we can get some more input on it.
I do encourage people too, also, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure the rest of the board feels the same. Mm-hmm. We're not always monitoring. I don't know what Facebook thread you're talking about, Kevin. So, I didn't see it, but we don't always see what's on Facebook. So please, if you got something to say that you think we should know, reach out to us, let us know. So.
I agree.
Also, if I may, if the board wanted, I did ask Deputy Chief Aramo from Rockland to join with us. If you wanted him to just make a statement about how things have been working in Rockland, he is available for that if you guys wanted to listen to that.
Deputy Aramo, if you want to speak on that, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Listening to a lot of your issues that seem to be revolve around citizen complaints and local people within the community, I would invite you over to come over and see what the town of Rockland and my Rockland Police Department is all about. We can show you firsthand. We had some bumps in the road when we first got started, but things have worked out very well now. And I challenge you, if there are legitimate complaints that are coming from the citizens of the town, I have not heard about them, because I have addressed every single complaint that has come forward with Director Hook, and we've been able to work it out amongst myself, Director Hook, and my own supervisors on the road. I make it a point to deal with everything one-on-one. So if my supervisor addresses something to me, I go directly to Director Hook or his deputy, and we work them out. We have really had no issues. So I understand everybody, you're never going to make people 100% happy, but we've come a long way over the last year or so, And I really can't say enough about our relationship that my officers and myself and has developed over the last year with Holbrook Dispatch.
Thank you, Deputy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else before we move on to the next agenda item? Make yourself seen. All right, not seeing anything. So thank you for joining us, Deputy, Deputy and Chief. Thank you both.
Tim, if I may just add as well, if anybody has any questions that I may be able to answer, if anybody wants to reach out to me, I am available as well. So if there's anything on the operations side or how we're doing it now that they don't quite understand or anything like that, I'd be more than willing to speak to anybody.
So do we call you or do we call Holbrook to get to you? Thank you, Deputy.
Tim, if we could just announce so people that do want to get in touch with us, our town emails are our first initial, our last name at abingtonma.gov. And that should be up on the website. So if anyone wants to reach out to any of us, please do so there and not on Facebook. I did get a Facebook message tonight from a resident that said that Abington was in this program back when Chief Franny was chief. Is that true, Deputy? Do you know?
No, if they're referring to any type of a regional dispatch, no. The only talk we had was when Chief Majensky and Chief Nuttall spoke about it back in 2010 or 2011. But as far as I know, that was the only conversation. Even I don't even know how much, if the technology was available even to do some type of a regional dispatch like that way back when.
Okay, and the other question I had from a resident today, that she lived in Quincy and there's a delay in response, but does Quincy do their own or do you know if they're, and I'm sure you're not an expert on that, but do you know if they do their own or if they're in a regional?
I'm not sure how Quincy operates. I'm not sure on that. I wouldn't be able to speak on it.
Okay. Pardon me?
Quincy does their own dispatch.
Okay, thank you. I agree with Tim and the others that I think we should continue to move forward on this unless some major surprise comes up in the next 2 days, and I don't see that happening. I've heard for several years it's been a very well-run operation over there. And I think we have both public safety officers, chiefs, suggesting that we do this. And I think we need to rely on them and the town manager to move forward on it.
Let me just say one last thing too, and I know he's trying to move this forward, but when I proposed this to the board back in late 2011, early 2012, there was a lot of questions on this as well. I remember several presentations when I met with the Board of Selectmen at the time, and there was a lot of concerns, and they thought I was crazy. They probably still think I'm crazy. I can't change that, but
that's got nothing to do with it.
but honestly, it's the best move for the fire department that we've ever made. I have no regret doing this. Has there been a couple of bumps in the road? Absolutely. There's going to be bumps in the road no matter which direction we move, whether either way. But it's been incredibly effective. It's been safe. It has been proven time and again during very difficult calls, numerous calls, major calls, and it's just so simply cost effective. I can't imagine any other way of doing this. And honestly, being able to look at the residents, eye to eye to tell them I didn't do the best thing I think for them. And I think if anything, moving the police over there, as Chief Cutter explained very well with his presentation, it's only going to make it much more better. We're going to eliminate those transfers. Everybody's upset with the fire department because of transfers. It wasn't always us. If we had everybody go on there immediately, those transfers never would have happened. It's a way to fix it. It's a way to be very cost effective. We're joining with very deep pockets in the state, if you will, the 911 financial system that is able to bring all of these improvements to the town of Abington, which we're going to need one way or the other. I'd rather have, state 911 monies fund this than trying to ask the residents to fund it in a capital request. So in closing, the fire department, it's the best move I think we've ever made, and I would never want to go backwards in time to try to do this on our own. It wouldn't work for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, last chance before we move on here. All right. Not seeing anything. Next, we're going to move on to John Stone, DPW operational update. John, I see you on here. I did earlier. If you want to take it away, go ahead.
Hey, Tim, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Did you guys get the road rating list from Scott?
Yes, we did get that.
All right, so I'd like to refer to that first, if possible.
Go right ahead.
All right. Recently, we created a new inventory of every road in town and gave it a condition assessment of 1 through 10, with 10 being the best. So I'd like to put, if possible, I'd like to put an article in the Springtown meeting to supplement our Chapter 90 funding. As you may know or may not know, Chapter 90 is our only source of road paving projects. It's our only source of keeping the roads in good condition. And we get about $390,000 a year from the state, but we can't keep up with the work that needs to be done. A lot of other towns do the same thing. They supplement Chapter 90 through a 5-year article at town meeting, or a 5-year bond, or whatever it takes. So I just didn't know if that might be something the board's interested in, because of our 219 roads, 65 were given a grade of below 5. And this was an effort on everybody's. We didn't pay any money for this rating. We did it ourselves in-house, various different people involved. So I know East Bridgewater just passed an article for about $350,000 to supplement their Chapter 90 to keep up with their roads, because there's just no way to do it with just Chapter 90 funding.
Scott and Sue, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. But I think, we definitely have to do it. Otherwise, we're never going to get caught up, and the roads are just getting worse. So it is a good thing. It's coming up with that number, and doing it consistently. That's going to be sort of the hard part to come up with. But I think it's something that we should get behind, and I think we'll discuss it with Finance Committee. We'll discuss it with the Capital Planning Committee and with this group. And I think we will, and I think we should come up with a number and put something on, and find a way to be consistent about it. If we come up with a number that's consistent, and even if, maybe he doesn't use it all 1 year, maybe he can bank it and get more bang for the buck if in 2 years he did a project. It could be a larger project. But I think we definitely need to be proactive on this and start putting some money towards it.
And we already checked with bond counsel, and it is bondable. So like if you take a look at maybe his 1 and 2 groups and see what that dollar figure looks like, it might be a good idea to just get one borrowing, and like Scott said, you just carry it out through the years until you finish the job, and then we do a permanent bonding after that.
Is that something you're looking at this town meeting coming up, Scott?
Yeah, I think, again, we're into the process now. We're massaging the numbers, but I think it's definitely something that if we can do it, let's get it started this year. Absolutely. And it's something that the whole town benefits from. Obviously it's not, it's a program, like John will tell you, everybody uses the roads.
Absolutely. That's why I feel it should be an article in town meeting to let the entire taxpayers vote upon it instead of just a select few people. That's just my feelings. And there's really, for this upcoming year, there's there's 6 areas in town would really like to focus on. And if you've driven around town, I'm sure you're well aware of them. Hancock from Chestnut Street to Patricia needs it bad, needs total repaving. Plymouth from the Whitman line to Center Ave is in dire need of repair. Birch Street, Lincoln Street, and a couple parts of Washington Street would like to get going on that this year. Desperately needed.
Joe, what about those side roads off Hancock Street? Are you talking about those two, like some of the older ones that were built, maybe 30 years ago now?
Yeah, they need it, Tim. They need it, but these other ones need it more because they're more heavily traveled. Like Hancock Street, Plymouth Street, Birch Street, Lincoln Street, and these 2 portions of Washington Street, a lot of people use them. But we would definitely like to get those side roads off of Hancock. Absolutely. At some point, not this year, but going forward, if we could supplement Chapter 90 funding, it would give us the ability to do main roads and side roads to some extent. But if we don't do anything, we're just going to have more roads rated below a 5 or a 4 or a 3. It's just something that needs to be done. The last time most of these roads were paved was when SOAR was installed 30 years ago, 25 years ago, whenever it was. So
more than that on Hancock Street, I remember.
More than that on Hancock Street. Absolutely, Tim. You're right.
So, John, how long should a road like Hancock Street last? So if we do that this year, when would we be looking to do it again?
I would like to hope that we would get 15 years out of it, Alex. But unfortunately, it's hard to predict. It depends on so many different variables. But I would like to think we'd get 15 years out of it.
On the main roads? And
on the main roads.
More on the smaller roads?
Absolutely. 20, 25 out of a side road, maybe 20, probably 20.
Okay. I think you've done a great job on this, John, and I definitely endorse you on it.
I appreciate that. We tried very hard.
John, this would just be for the roads. Anything regarding the sidewalks or anything on any of these roads?
Not right now, Kevin. Like I said, we can't keep up with the roads themselves that people are driving on. Would like to get to the point where when we repave a road, we can do the sidewalk as well, but we're not even close to that yet.
Understandable.
It's a tough situation that we're in. And I think, if we let it go any longer, it's just going to get a lot worse.
Well, I do appreciate everything that you guys do down there. You guys are have a lot of tasks on your hand and you guys get it done. I'd love to see you get some more help and get some money in to get some of these roads done. But
that would be great.
I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kevin. We try hard every day.
Yeah, no, it shows. And you run a great department.
Thank you. On that note, I'd like to give a shout out to my guys, my 12 guys who salted and plowed yesterday for probably about 13, 14 hours. Missed the Super Bowl. Every one of them showed up and not one of them complained. So the town's very lucky to have them. So I want to give those guys a shout out.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Next I have, what we have coming up is a grant along Lincoln Boulevard and Glenowitz Way. We received a grant about a year and a half ago for $400,000 for a shared use path from Lincoln Street at Washington all the way to the high school so kids can walk and take their bike to school. That's going through the bidding process right now. So far we have 20 bidders, close to 20 bidders, I think 19. And that work has to be completed by June 30th. But I think it will be a great asset to the town. When you'll see it, you'll understand why.
And that was already started up by the high school, is that correct?
Yeah, we had to do one portion of it, Alex. We wanted to do one portion of it while school was open, before school opened in the summer.
Yeah.
So one portion of it is done, but when you see the finished product, I think it will be a great asset to the town. It was a $400,000 grant. We had to pay for design, but I think it's safe for the kids, and I think it's just a great asset for the town.
And that's going, you said, all the way down to Washington?
Yes, sir. It's going from Lincoln Boulevard on Washington all the way down to the high school's first entrance.
Right.
And it's going to be an 8-foot wide shared use path for walking and biking, granite curbing, and a 4-foot wide grass strip.
Right.
And it should look really good upon completion. But I'm excited about the fact that we have 19 people that asked for the bids. They requested the bids. So that should very competitive bidding process. So we could get a good price on that. So what else we have going on? The National Grid LED light. We're converting all our street lights over to LEDs. You may or may not know that, but it's going to save the town about $40,000 a year. And upon completion, we'll get a rebate. The town will receive a rebate for $51,000, somewhere in that vicinity. There's no cost to the town, and the lights are actually brighter. Other towns have already done it. I know Whitman's done it, East Bridgewater's done it, and Brockton has done it. It's just it's a win-win situation. It's going to save the town a lot of money over time, and it'll make the town brighter, and it's a good thing.
Will we be turning on other lights that have been off for years?
Yes, sir, Alex. That's a good point. Probably about 10 or 11 years ago, there were about 40 streetlights turned off in town as a cost-saving measure. So we'll be looking to turn those lights back on and still save money under the LED project. But the project, it's not going to start for about another month and a half to 2 months, and it's going to take a year. So if you see anyone at National Grid working at night, that's what they're doing, replacing the sodium lamps to LED lights.
And John, on those, was there any lights that were physically removed from the poles, or are they all still up, just red capped?
The lamps are still up, Kevin, and they're just red capped. But we'll be looking to turn all those on.
That'll be great.
And some studies have shown that the LEDs reduce crime because they're brighter. And we have 867 lights, so that'll be a good project for the town. Make the town look better and save the town money.
John, do you know how long it will take them to do it? Maybe you said I might have missed it.
It's about a year, Kevin. It's up to National Grid schedule. There's zero cost to the town. They even pay for the police details. But I wanted to let you guys know because they're going to be doing the work at night, and you might get phone calls and that type of thing. And one more thing, the life expectancy of an LED lamp is 10 to 14 years, whereas the sodium lamps, the life expectancy is 3 to 5 years. So we save on that end as well. So there's some good news there.
And National Grid will continue to own them, so if a light does go out, it would be National Grid that will replace it, not us.
That's correct, Alex. Very good point. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
I don't have any.
All right, the Central Street Bridge is in the design process right now. We were approved at last town meeting, to rehabilitate the Central Street Bridge. Still in the design process. I'll update you guys or Scott as soon as the design comes back. As you know or may not know, we got approved at the last town meeting to install a new force main, a sewer force main from Summer Street to Walmart. The original force main is about 2 miles long, made of ductile iron, and we've had 2 breaks in the last 5 years, so we felt it was time to replace it. So they'll be ripping up the road on Summer Street from Progress all the way to Route 18, a little portion of Route 18, all of Vernon, all the way down Brockton Ave to Walmart. We were able to get a low interest loan through the state, and we also received, I believe it was about $280,000 off the loan because we are a compact community. So that project is 100% designed. We'll be going out to bid in the spring, early spring, and hopefully shovels in the ground late spring, and that project is going to take a year. And it will be made of plastic, and it's going to be 20 inches as opposed to the 16-inch main we have now.
So in that bid, does that include paving those streets?
Yes, sir. curb to curb.
Great.
It's a $7 million project. Okay. Also, we just applied for a grant for the Hunts Pond Dam. That's in need of rehabilitation, and the state come out with a new program to help fund dam and seawall repair. So we've applied for that grant. Each town could get up to $250,000. We'll find out in April if we got it.
And is that the dam up by Walmart?
That's correct,
Oh.
Kevin. If you drive down Mill Street, you can't miss it. That's correct. So we're applying for a grant for that. As you may, another project we have going on, you may or may not know that the intersection of Hancock and Chestnut was placed on the TIP program, which means the intersection will be improved upon with state funding. So currently the intersection sits on the TIP plan for federal year 2025. The project includes a roundabout similar to the one at the intersection of North Quincy and Chestnut as it is now. But it's badly needed at Chestnut and Hancock. There's been a lot of accidents there, and unfortunately, I think even a death. So that's at 25% design. It's a $3 million project. The state pays for the project. We just got to pay for the design.
John, can I interrupt for a sec?
Sure.
I just want to, the dam project, that was the one where we needed to come up with a match, correct?
Yes, Sue. It's a very good point.
Thank you.
25% match. It's the only one of these that we had to come up with a match. You're right. I forgot about that. Absolutely.
John, on the roads when they get repaved, I know, are we looking at the water mains, the sewer on them being replaced, or?
Absolutely. And the gas mains, yes.
We're
Absolutely.
notifying before we, okay, perfect.
Absolutely. So we're putting a roundabout at the intersection of Hancock and Chestnut, as voted on by the Board of Selectmen, I think about 4 years ago now. The selectmen voted upon that. And we'll be scaling that hill down a few feet for to reduce ice hazards in the winter. And we'll be raising up the middle of the intersection where the roundabout will be placed to make it less of a steep hill. So that's at 25% design. Not slated for federal year 2025, but if another project on the TIP plan in another town isn't ready to go, ours might be moved up. So hopefully that'll be the case, and we can get a nice roundabout at that intersection because it's the most dangerous intersection in town.
That'd be great to get that done, or get started at least.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And,
John, do you know if we'll have to take land for that, or do we have enough land in the roadway already to put that roundabout in?
it's a good point, Jim. We're only going to take our own land. There's some land at the corner store that, if you looked at it with the naked eye, it would appear to be their land, but is it actually town land? And we've talked to the owner of the country store, and he's on board. He just wants to see a safer intersection, and that's it.
Good, thanks, John.
You're welcome, Jim. And that's pretty much all I have, everyone. Any
John,
questions?
Did we had some documents that we need signed, right? That
Yes, to make Sonia the borrowing agent. Actually, Kelly's on. I'm going to have Kelly explain it to you.
okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that they will be discussed more at the next meeting when Sonia's here to talk about the applying for the funding for the force main.
Okay.
But just to introduce these documents that you will be seeing is there's a certifying authority to file and then just an authority to file. Both of them just give Sonia the permission to apply for the loans and bonds needed for the project. So like I said, I'll have Scott explain it or Sonia explain it more. But I think those are going to be, they need to be signed in person and then approved at a meeting. So I think they're going to be approved at the next meeting, but signed whenever you guys can get in to sign them. And those will go as part of the bid package when the force main goes out to bid.
So I will have those at the office after tomorrow. So if, you know, you guys can pop by town hall, and if you can get in the door, that'd be great. Come on up and we'll get you to sign.
If we can't, we'll just call for you.
You just give me a call. I'll come down.
If you're not out getting coffee like the last time I tried to get in.
That's only at 10 o'clock in the morning.
I am too predictable. Huh?
John, did you have anything else for your update?
No, that's all, Tim.
John, thank you very much, and thank you to you guys for all the hard work.
Thank you very much.
doesn't
I
go
appreciate it.
unnoticed.
Thank you, and thank you, Kelly, for explaining that that process.
Of course, thank you guys.
Thank you, John. Thank you,
Thank you,
Kelly.
Kelly.
Take care.
Good night.
And next up on the agenda is the grant of easement for Belcher and Cook Way. Scott, just reading this, it looks like it's just a formality at this point. Town council's hammered everything out.
Yeah, this is, you guys have voted this. It's been to town meeting. Everything's finally, all the legal stuff's done. And we just need you guys really just to vote to come in and execute the agreement. And then again, if you guys could stop by the office throughout the week, we'll have it there for you guys to actually sign.
Okay, so is there a motion on this or any discussion before a motion?
I'll make that motion. This was obviously brought up at town meeting, like Scott said, and this is just us formalizing it.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of granting the easement?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Moving on is the discussion on the host agreement for the marijuana sales.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'd like to recuse myself from this and all future discussions on cannabis.
To do it.
I will sign off at this point. Please give me a text when you're through discussing this, and I'll sign back in.
All right, we'll do, Alex. Thank you.
Okay, so really, and I'll mention a little bit more, I guess, in as I go on into the town manager report. At town meeting, there was an extension on the number of licenses that the town is going to approve or has approved. We are expecting final approval from the Attorney General's office on that vote and on the zoning sometime in mid-March. So in anticipation of that, we have had several entities reach out to us to enter into community host agreements. So I've discussed it with town council on what we should do and how that process will work. Now, we've already have agreements with a couple of entities that were previously approved. The agreements are fairly boilerplate. There isn't a lot of room for negotiation anymore. The Cannabis Control Commission sort of is kind of relegated what we're allowed to ask for, and it's all very similar. But that being said, you know, we have that opportunity for to negotiate an agreement and then for the board to sign off on whether we're interested in this or not. So in the discussion with town council, we thought the most efficient way is if amongst the board, if you guys decide to have maybe delegate one of you to come in and actually spend the time with me and the different entities that are proposing to enter into these agreements, that we could discuss it, come up with something that we could come back to the board, something that we think would be appropriate for the board, as opposed to bringing each entity in front of the board and doing it in any sort of, you know, long drawn out session that just doesn't make sense, because again, there aren't a lot of different things that we can put in there. You know, we have, like I said, some existing agreements. They asked for, I think, some sort of an impact fee maybe, and or there's a percentage of gross sales that come down our way. that's kind of what would be standard in any agreement. There isn't a lot much other stuff that you can put in there. But again, it would be good if we could pick one of the board members who'd be interested in doing this to come and sit with me, and then, you know, we would bring it back to the board when we're done.
Yeah, I agree, Scott. That is the easiest way. Last time, I believe we just had the board motion to authorize the town manager and town council to negotiate on our behalf. If you'd like a member of the board in with you guys, I don't see an issue with that. Is there any board member that's interested in joining this one-man committee?
Another
The
one.
least surprising event of the night. Jim has volunteered.
You volunteered, Jim, for the next, what, 2 months, 2.5 months?
Well, that's
Right
the
around-
thing.
It shouldn't take more than
Shouldn't take
2.5
that long.
months, right, Scott?
We should be able to get it done, Phil. I would hope to, you know, be coming back, right after we know that the vote was certified and that you know, there's the new zoning's in effect. We'd like to start the process now and then come right back to you.
I nominate Jim Conley.
Mike, can you I guess the motion, Kevin, the
second.
motion here is going to be that the Board of Selectmen will authorize Scott Lambiase, Jim Conley, and the town council to negotiate on our behalf a host community agreement and bring it back to the full board for approval. So that motion's made by Kevin, seconded by
I'll
Mike.
second. Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. You guys are authorized to negotiate. So, next up is the town manager report. I don't know if you want to wait for Alex to come back on.
See it in the packet.
It's in the packet, yeah. That's about how much
So
stuff.
missing in mine.
Yeah, I'll give Alex a minute.
Okay. I just sent him a text, so he should be back any second.
Just FYI, it could have been done by now.
Oh, I see him back on there. Here we go.
Okay, so most of this will be, you know, what you're going to be seeing and what we're going to be talking about next month, or next meeting rather. On our agenda, we are going to have a discussion on where we are going to hold the town elections in the future. And what I thought, the reason I'm bringing it up tonight is after discussing it with Leanne and hearing from Peter Schaefer on the matter, they would like you to take a look or maybe consider putting a small group together to go and take a look at some of the different town buildings that we have, the school buildings included, as Peter has said, that, you know, they're absolutely town buildings and they'd be, you know, happy to host the elections at any building, but we should look at them to see. So we're comparing apples to apples when we're considering if we want to move the location. There is quite a possibility that the current location that we have been using won't be available to us in the future anyways, or that we may, you know, want to look rather than renew the contract or whatever we did. So that is something that we're going to talk about. It will be on the agenda on the 22nd. So sometime between now and then, I will send out an email to everybody to sort of try and figure out how we can best, you know, whittle down what buildings we want to look at or what schools we want to look at and what issues that we want to have addressed when we're looking at them. So obviously it'll be as many of us as we can get together with Leanne and probably Peter Schaefer.
And Scott, I had mentioned to you before on that, just before that meeting, to make sure that we had the costs that we've been spending as compared to, you know, when we do it at a private place compared to a public place. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
thank you.
Like I said, I'll reach out on that and try and get some dates.
But do we have a list of some of the locations?
A list of buildings?
Yeah. What they're suggesting possibly, like Frollo.
Well, nobody's making any suggestions.
Okay.
It's kind of, somebody asked to be on the agenda. They've asked repeatedly, actually, to be on the agenda to talk about, you know, where we've been going. And
We just had it last year, right? We just had it on the agenda last year.
yeah, but you know what, in my talks with Leanne, just to bring it up to ask if she could be part of the conversation, she also said that, you know, they're open to looking at the other sites too. So that's why we're going to discuss it next meeting.
Yeah.
You know,
I just know it was on.
yeah, it was on past, I think it was before I got here, you guys actually had a long talk about it.
Yeah, it was on. We had a long meeting because I remember we had a lot of the poll workers, I think, were quite upset at the location at the time at the high school, I believe. And Leanne was on, but it would be good to, I guess, go over it again.
Yeah, and I think it's important to like get you guys to look at any other town buildings, but I'll talk to Leanne and talk to Peter Schaefer first to sort of narrow it down on which ones we would actually consider using. Maybe the senior center. They're all going to have their pros and cons, but we'll try and get an idea, and then, you know, an idea of what it, like you said, again, what it costed at the Emerald Hall, what it would cost if we entertain going back there, what reasons we may or may not have for doing that. But mostly the reason I wanted to bring it up this week was only just to say is that I'd love to get you guys to take a look at some of these buildings between now and when we actually have a discussion on it.
Yeah, I think Alex, we looked at the senior center, Beaverbrook. We talked about the high school and Emerald Hall. I don't know if there was really any other locations, were there? I think the other ones, like the center school and the North School, I think were kind of run down and too decimated to even handle anything like that.
And Frollo, I don't think is handicap friendly.
Yeah, Frollo isn't, and I mean, every single room in there is full to be, I mean, we could use the gym, but parking is, would be probably a nightmare. I don't know how you get people in and out of there with an election that easy.
This is what we'll discuss next time, but when it's on.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
I don't want to get too deep into it without it on the agenda, so.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll carry on, but yeah, Scott, just name a time and place that we can meet up and you know, tour the buildings, and whoever can make it, but you're never going to find a time where we could all.
All right, I will I'll reach out to Peter Schaefer and Leanne tomorrow and see what we can work out.
Thank you.
So we started our committee meeting with the Capital Planning Committee, and we've offered up some policies on how that Capital Planning Committee will work. There are some model policies that I've taken from other towns, and they're part of a whole comprehensive set of fiscal policies and financial policies that I'm going to bring to this board to adopt. We're currently, Sue and I and Sonia are currently reviewing them. We expect the Finance Committee to review them. Then we would like you guys to review them also. And I'm going to get those out to you. They'll become a future, probably a discussion item for the next few meetings. But you will get them during this week just to kind of start looking over them. We will also plan for our next meeting on the 22nd. I'm going to have ask Sonia to be here because there are some bonding issues that we're going to talk about, and there'll be a borrowing stuff that you guys are going to have to sign. So she'll be here to explain that. And we have begun getting into some conversations on our healthcare and the townwide healthcare and some of the results of what's come out after leaving Mayflower. And I'm going to have Sonia here to sort of discuss some of those issues with this and just give you an update on where we are on that. And The only other thing that I guess again, it's going to be on your next agenda is the clothing collection bin policies. I did send them to you and to Alex, and if there's anything that you want to change about them, if you can get them to me before then, that'd be great. Otherwise, what I think we'll do is put them on your agenda and put them on the Board of Health agenda. The final thing that's going to come up, and it is going to be, again, on our 22nd, is we are going to open the warrant for the special and the annual town meeting. We're going to open up the warrant, and it's going to be for the town meeting that's going tentatively scheduled for Monday, April 5th, as is required by the bylaw. Obviously, we're going to open it and ask to delay it in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 9, to May 24th, I believe is the date. Again, we're not sure what that's going to look like or how we're going to do it. Where the quorum, according to our attorney Corbo, is still set at 75. But do we want to be inside, outside? How we're going to work it, I don't know yet. But that is going to be in front of us next week, so our next meeting. That's it.
Anybody got anything for the town manager? Anybody have a motion?
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
You're adjourned. Thank
Aye.
you, guys.